Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me at the NobleCon conference. My name is Dave Rosa. I'm the CEO of NeuroOne Medical Technologies Corporation. We are a NASDAQ listed company in the field of neurology. I'm going to put up here just a forward-looking statement because we are a public company. I'm sure you've all seen that many times. So in terms of what NeuroOne does, as I mentioned, we're a company in the neurology space as well as neurosurgery, and we make electrodes that are used for neurosurgical procedures. So everything from epilepsy to Parkinson's disease. One of the newer fields is depression, back pain due to failed back surgeries, multiple failed back surgeries, and there's many other indications that we're not focused on right now, but from a platform standpoint would apply. Urinary incontinence is certainly one of them. High blood pressure is another. What these devices do, just to be clear, is they perform multiple functions. So in the brain, what they'll do is record electrical activity. So for all of you that have ever had an EKG, think of this technology from a diagnostic standpoint as taking an EKG of the brain. It's looking for irregular activity. It's also looking for the borders of brain tumors. So when neurosurgeons go in to operate on a patient, prior to doing that, they want to be able to use electrodes like this to border the brain tumor. So they get everything that's tumorous, nothing more, nothing less in the procedure. And really the opportunity for us has come about because electrode technology hasn't changed since the 60s. Most of the big companies that you'll hear about or that you know about today, Abbott, Medtronic, Boston Scientific, most of their advancements have been in the hardware and the software, so the devices that are either providing stimulation through the electrode or ablation, they've focused on that because developing thin film high definition electrodes is not an easy thing to do. Currently today, NeuroOne is still the only company that has an FDA clearance for a high definition thin film electrode. Next slide, just a few highlights that I'll touch on. I'll go into a little bit more detail in some of the upcoming slides. But we do have a few key strategic partnerships. One is with the Mayo Clinic that has been ongoing now for about 7 years. They are a current investor. They've been an investor in the company from the beginning. And then Zimmer Biomet. Zimmer's been a partner with us since July of 2020 when we signed an exclusive distribution and development agreement with them to actually commercialize our first two diagnostic devices. And I'll talk a little bit more about that agreement in a bit. And then when you look at really the market opportunities, from a therapeutic standpoint, it's in the billions of dollars. And it's not potential, it's actual revenue that's being generated today. So if you look at the diagnostic market, it's relatively small. That's what we've partnered with Zimmer on. That market's estimated to be about $100 million in revenue in the US. And again, the therapeutics much larger than that. So what really makes us special? I like to put it into these four buckets. These thin film electrodes, first of all, have greater precision than what you typically see in the marketplace today. I had it described to me years ago by a very famous neurologist at the Mayo Clinic. And I asked him, which was difficult for him, but I said, can you put this in layman's terms? You know, what's so special about this technology versus what's out there? And he said, Dave, you were born in the 60s. He said, I don't know if you remember what television quality was in the 60s, but he said, put one of those TVs next to a TV in 2020, and that's the difference. You're the 2020 TV. What you're competing with is the 1960s TV. And the technology inherently has less interference, lower impedance. That allows for a much clearer signal. And in the Mayo's case, they've even in their early cases have reported that they were able to identify single neuron activity. I'll tell you why that's important in a few minutes. The next one is thin film. This film is as thin as a piece of paper. You can roll it up You can slide it under the lining in the brain. You're able to, in some cases, to place this much less invasively. And you'll hear about our efforts to place these percutaneously through the skin without making a big incision. One of the largest ones from a customer perspective is the combination device. Most of the devices on the market today either perform one of the three functions that I mentioned. They're either recording, they're either ablating, or they're stimulating for therapeutic purposes. The intention of NeuroOne was really to develop one device that could perform all three. And the reason why that's critical is it requires a separate surgery by the neurosurgeon to perform these multiple functions. And our goal was to be able to package all those into one procedure. And then the last one is cost and manufacturing. We use photolithography. Think of a printing press. These electrodes get literally just come off of what looks like a sophisticated printing press. Much cheaper to manufacture than competitive devices, which are all built using manual labor. So this is a pretty gory picture of the brain. What you're looking at is a competitive device. It's got a number of pellets. I think there's 64 on there. And you can see like the wires that are coming out. Those wires all have to be soldered to each individual contact. It's a very invasive procedure where you have to take the entire top part of the skull off of the patient, dissect the dura to place one of these devices. There is not much space in between the dura and the brain. So the dura is the protective lining for the brain, which really brings out the importance of having an electrode that you could literally slide in because of its thinness, or roll up and literally place it through a narrow tube. So you'll see here that the thickness of the device, we're about 90% thinner, 90% lighter than the competitive devices, which again gives us an advantage in terms of placement. So this represents our product portfolio. I'll show you some of the individual products in the next slides. In the pink box where it says diagnostic, those are the two devices that are covered under the agreement with Zimmer Biomet. They both perform the same function, purely diagnostic, recording brain activity, trying to identify the problematic area in the brain so that the neurosurgeon can go in there and remove that tissue that's causing epilepsy. Or, in addition to that, again, if they're trying to map a brain tumor, they're really trying to identify the borders of that tumor so they can be more precise in what they're able to remove. And again, that market for diagnostics only, about $100 million. In the blue boxes, you have the therapeutic, or what I call combination devices. The one that's listed as the ablation electrode, that is one of the combination therapies that will not only record the problematic area in the brain, but using that same device in place, when connected to a piece of hardware that we would market, it would also allow the doctor in one procedure to remove the problematic tissue. And I'll explain a little bit more on a slide just dedicated to ablation. And then the other therapeutic areas that we're going after, whereby you're implanting the electrode based on a permanent basis. The example that I have here is spinal cord stimulation for back pain, but deep brain stimulation would also apply with the electrodes we have in development. In terms of time frame, this slide's a little outdated. So we do have our cortical diagnostic electrodes that are already cleared by FDA for less than 30-day use. Zimmer Biomet is selling that product now. The second one, this depth electrode, it's literally a tubular electrode that's about 0.8 millimeters in diameter. That device, we expected to have clearance in Q1. The FDA came back to us on March the 11th and said one of the biocompatibility tests we did, they felt we didn't meet their criteria. We strongly disagreed and have appealed it with the FDA. We will hear back from them next month, but we believe that we've met the criteria in the test that we performed. If for some reason we don't win that appeal, we actually, in a parallel path, initiated a new set of studies on biocompatibility to, in essence, meet the requirement that we already felt we met. But either way, we'll be in a position sometime this summer, either with a clearance or with a resubmission regarding the biocompatibility test. In terms of the combination devices, the ablation, the diagnostic and ablation device that I referenced, we expect to submit that to FDA in Q1 of 2023, so probably in about 8 months from now. And then the implantable, the fully implantable devices that have the capability of doing diagnostics and therapeutic stimulation, we're still in development with those, but just recently announced that we successfully tested those devices over a 5-year period, demonstrating that they lasted both for diagnostic purposes as well as stimulation, which was really key because that's a key metric that FDA looks for, 5-year durability for these types of devices. So the Zimmer development agreement, people have said to me, gosh, this is an orthopedics company. Why did they do a distribution and development agreement with NeuroOne? So what you're looking at is a robot that they market for neurosurgery procedures. And this right here is the actual electrode. And what that robot does is it pre-drills holes in the brain, deep within the brain, so that they are accurate in terms of depth as well as size. You don't want these electrodes going too far in the brain. You want them at certain particular angles. All that gets programmed into the robot. It pre-drills the holes so that you can eliminate human error in the procedure. So Zimmer markets the robot. They don't have the electrode to be able to combine with that, and that's the reason why. There's on average about 15 electrodes that are placed in the brain. The average selling price is anywhere from $800 to $1,000. So that's an additional, we'll round the math up, $15,000 worth of revenue just alone in the electrode. The other exciting thing for us is there's a number of ancillary devices that you need so that the electrode will function with the robot. You need a drill bits, intracranial rulers. These are devices that Zimmer makes in their, and provides and markets in their orthopedics business. So it was a way for NeuroOne to really be able to conserve the capital that we had just for electrode development while Zimmer was responsible for all the ancillary devices. So, and with their sales force, distributors, direct people, I believe they have about 150 people in the field. We would not have been able to match that with the budget that we have at NeuroOne. The deal called for a $2 million upfront licensing fee with another $4 million to be delivered under certain milestones, which were based on delivering our depth electrode. So the other partnership we have is with the Mayo Clinic. I already mentioned they're an investor in the company and have been for years. The two physicians that are listed on there, Dr. Worrell and Dr. Van Gompel, Dr. Worrell is a neurologist, Dr. Van Gompel a neurosurgeon. We communicate with both of these guys, if not every week, at least every few weeks. They're still very much involved, not just in helping us with the development of some of the upcoming technologies we have, but also performing testing on the existing technologies that we have clearance for. So this is the Evo cortical electrode. This is already cleared by FDA. I've already talked about the thin film nature of it and the greater precision. We do offer a few other advantages in that we provide pre-sterilized cables which are disposable. All of our vendors require that those cables be re-sterilized, and there's been cases that have been canceled because someone in the hospital forgot to sterilize the cables. So these are one-time use, everything's completely disposable. The other thing that I didn't mention is just what I'll call it the film friendliness in the brain. What you're looking at the bottom right here is a a side-by-side of a competitive device with ours. And the side which is to the right, to your right, which looks cleaner, this is evidence of inflammation when these devices are placed on the brain. And what it basically shows is that there's less inflammation created in the brain when our device is placed versus a competitive silicone device. We use a material that's called polyimide that's been used in the body for years and generally considered to be very friendly. Thin film depth electrode. So if you look at this picture right here, this is a patient's skull. I think there's probably about 13, on average there's about 15 electrodes that get placed. This is the type of electrode that would be used with Zimmer's robot. People opt for this on the diagnostic side because you don't have to remove the top part of the skull. I don't know personally if I think that's less invasive, getting a number of electrodes drilled deep into my brain, but about 90–95% of the cases are performed this way today. And again, we have a 510(k) clearance for 24 hours and have appealed the decision for 30-day. This is the technology that I refer to as being diagnostic and therapeutic. So let me give you an example of how we differ. Today, if you came in for a procedure, if you were resistant to drug therapy, they would perform a surgery where they would put devices like this into your brain. You'd sit in the hospital 3 to 5 days. After they had identified the problematic areas, they would remove all those electrodes. You would go home, and then you would come back most likely for a laser procedure. You would come back typically about 3 months later. They would place the laser in the places where they wanted to remove your brain tissue. So they would re-drill the holes, use the laser. You'd have a second hospitalization, a second surgery, and then you would be discharged. There would be no opportunity for them to touch up those areas. You're no longer being monitored with any electrode technology. So you might have to come back for a subsequent procedure. What we do is we put that electrode in, we record the activity, we find the problematic area. Once the doctor is confident he's identified that area, he connects to a box, that box that says RF generator, and that will heat the tissue, burn the tissue. It's already a type of technology that's used today, but I said earlier in the presentation that these devices typically only perform one function. In this case, you're a patient, you're coming in for one hospitalization, they're drilling the holes, placing the electrodes, finding the problem, connecting to the RF box, ablating the tissue, destroying the problematic tissue, and then reconnecting for diagnostic purposes. Because what this allows you to do is then go back and say, did I get all the problematic tissue? Do I need to touch it up? Do I need to perform another procedure? So this is a really exciting technology for us. Combination, again, diagnostic and therapeutic that we intend to submit to FDA early 2023. The last large market that we're going after now is spinal cord stimulation. I won't go into a ton of details here, but I'm a guy that has chronic back pain. I've had 5 surgeries on my back for ruptured discs. So I live in chronic pain. If you have pain below the waist, spinal cord stimulation is very effective. The stimulation blocks the neurons that are in pain, preventing it from ever reaching the brain, so you don't feel pain. The procedure today is they put in test electrodes that look like our diagnostic electrodes. Patient has them in for a week. After a week, they come back. They tell the doctor, I feel great. I want the therapy implanted. They would then typically implant a large electrode that looks like our cortical electrode to stimulate a broader area in the back. And that would require an incision in the patient's back, whereas what we're capable of doing, because the film is so thin, the idea is to roll the film up, place it through the same needle that you would use in the back procedure, so percutaneously. You would place it in the spine, leave it there for the trial period, as well as if it's going to be used permanently, thereafter. So you're only placing the electrode one time. Placement of electrodes is really key in the spine. You get a lot of movement of electrodes. You won't get that with devices like this. Deep brain stimulation, same concept, same advantages, except this would be just a stim treatment for Parkinson's. Artificial intelligence, that's the future. What we're talking about is getting patients out of wheelchairs by putting more contacts in the brain. What you're looking at are 900 points of contact on that film. That's the size of a quarter. So we know we can develop electrodes that would provide thousands of contacts. Management team, most of it's big companies, Medtronic, Boston Scientific, Camilo Diaz-Botia came from Neuralink, which is Elon Musk's neuro company. So we've got a lot of broad experience. And again, I won't go into scientific advisory board members, but we've got Emory, Stanford, Justin Williams is the inventor of the technology. Vanessa Tolosa also came from Elon Musk's company. And our board of directors that, again, have large company, small company experience. So one of the last slides is on the financials. This was at the end of the year. Our stock was about $2. Our stock's at about $1 today. What happened? The FDA announcement. Personally, I think it's an overreaction, given that it was a disagreement on this one particular test. Whether or not we get clearance from the FDA now, it's a matter of time before we do. It's not a device issue. We haven't had issues with getting this technology approved from the FDA in the past. So I'm personally still confident we'll be able to do that. But the stock right now is at a low. And hopefully we'll have some news that will change that. So just to allow maybe for some questions, I'll just leave the key takeaway slide up because that's the last slide I have. Are there any questions that I can answer that maybe I wasn't very clear on or you'd like more information on? Yes? No. So we just finished the 5-year testing on that, and what we're doing right now is refining the manufacturing process. So a lot of people ask me about our patent portfolio and intellectual property. What I'll tell you is this is the first business I've been in where the manufacturing is probably 80% and the way you process the devices are 80% of why they work and 20% because of the design. So right now what we're doing is we're refining the manufacturing so that we can build these with high yields. But no, we have not started the US study yet, and I don't expect that to start for at least another 18 months or longer, depending upon what we find in manufacturing. Any other questions? Well, thanks for showing up. Appreciate it, and I'll still be around for another 3-4 hours if you have any additional questions. Thank you.